Thanks, Mike. Hey, John. Hey, Dan. John, will you get that microphone for Mike out of there? He'll give it to you, Zach. Our guy showed up late. He had some issue. I know it. It's back to us. So I asked Mike if he would come and share. One of the things that's been on my mind quite a bit, and I'll pass these down through here, is just related with Mike's agency with EMA is having some contracts in place that are the result of a bid that we can keep as a standing bid for disaster debris removal. One of the lessons from Western Kentucky and Eastern Kentucky is it's very helpful to have this in place and ready in case of a situation. So I've talked to Mike about this. Mike's been working. Mike's going to share with you all kind of where he's at. And then the other item is that we put in the budget money to purchase 2 tornado shelters. And we've identified a place up off Lyle Road as a potential site. And then another potential site is there in Stamping Ground. We've talked to both owners. Both the owners are very receptive. We will have to have CAM do like an agreement with an easement, permanent easement for the placement and, some details. But I'll turn it over to you, Mike.
Absolutely. So starting with the shelters, I gave you pictures of the actual pieces of equipment. On the inside, they look very similar to a school bus that doesn't have wheels on it. The company comes in and does their own site preparation. They offer the service to do reinforced concrete, but after speaking with the judge yesterday, I reached out to the company, and there is a possible cost savings if we form and pour our own concrete and have it ready for them to just back the truck up to. So that's something we may discuss depending on.
Do they give us the exact dimensions of what they want?
Yeah, they give CAD drawings for how it should be, what the rebar placement is, all of that, so that it's certified to be up to 185 mile an hour winds. So
we would hire a contractor. We would hire a contractor, right, and they would pour the pads.
Right. The storm shelter company has people that could come in and do that, but it just makes no sense to pay somebody to come from Connecticut or New Jersey when we've got very capable people around here that could accomplish that. They have these structures in stock. There's no supply chain issues or anything like that. As soon as the temperature gets to a point where we could realistically expect concrete to cure at this thickness, we can go ahead and just basically pull the trigger and say, let's start the process, transport it on this day. The estimate without them actually seeing our sites is $1,500 per person. We're looking at 2 100-occupant structures, $150,000 to $155,000 by the time we're ready to open the door and put people in there. As I said, they keep them in stock, so there hasn't been a inflation rate or anything like that would go with it. Probably if we waited beyond the end of the fiscal year, there would be a price change, but we're not in a position to do that. We're ready to get them rolling as soon as temperatures are going to stay above 50 for a certain number of days. Do you guys have any questions on?
Yeah. Mike, a couple things we've discussed as we've gone through this. I know the judge is passionate about getting these placed, but one of them was generators or electric. We kind of mentioned those as well.
So,
and then the other thing is who holds the key? Or
right.
Isn't there an automatic? We talked about doing some remote automatic stuff as well.
We absolutely did. These structures come with solar panels to support ventilation and temperature control. We could, we talked about putting a small transfer box on the outside where we could roll a portable generator up to it. If it becomes, you know, if it's used frequently, like there's a possibility of doing for Warming Center or, you know, other versions, it might make sense to put a permanent generator on there. But for now, with the thought of it only being used 3 or 4 times a year, as we watch the radar and we know that it's a possibility tomorrow or the next day, we could just roll the generator up to it, hook it in, and be ready to go. These come with a, I guess it's similar to trailer lock, you know, the single handle latch. We're looking to upgrade that to an actual door jamb with an electronic lock so that either a phone app or some other version would allow us to unlock it remotely.
How would you unlock it remotely if there's no power to it?
The solar panels and everything that come with it automatically are going to have a certain, you know, constant power source. It's always going to have some.
There'll be a battery that.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just a question of, you know, if we're using it at full strength and housing 100 people, you know, we need to be able to provide extra resources instead of just the standby resources.
Is that with the concrete or not?
It includes their concrete. That's why I think there would be a cost savings, and we might, you know, get, you know, under the 150 range if we provide our own concrete.
I'm not doing math. Is 150 for both?
No, it's $300,000 total. 150 for stamping ground and 150 for the one that's going on Lyle Road.
Judge, I would have thought there could be federal, is there potential for federal grants on these types of things? Because it's preventative, not kind of reactive.
Absolutely, and it would be covered under mitigation grants. Happy to follow that up. But you guys know that I've been working on the last mitigation grant for a little over 4.5 years, and we're just now getting to a purchase point on Leesburg. So if we applied tomorrow, I don't know that any of us will still be in when it gets funded.
Good point.
But I can see once we place a couple, we'll start having capabilities for fundraisers and stuff. People will see the value, and, you know, private communities and corporations and stuff could help us out with you know, sheltering people that are unable to go to any other solid structure.
Any other questions? So I'm. Yeah. Yeah. Right. No.
Yeah, there you go.
No. I did think about, you know, like it could be an art project for somebody to paint the side of it.
Yeah.
But I just think that if we could move forward and talk to the 2 owners, Cam, draft easements and agreements, and then once we have those in place, also between now and then get a cost estimate on the pouring the 2 pads,
right.
And then look at you all making a decision to actually approve the purchase.
Yeah. And so Ryan and Rob know this was something we budgeted for. We talked about the price earlier last year.
The landowners.
No.
Need to be discussed.
My conversation with the one landowner on Lyle Road was there was no, you know, this would be a donation of the easement.
Right.
And
same thing
you,
in stamping
you've talked to
ground.
Stamping Ground, very open to, and the stamping ground placement is going to be right in the middle of the trailer park.
Right.
I mean, it's lot 5 or something like that.
But one of the trailers that got permanently destroyed last year in the tornado, she just chose not to put a new structure on there, so we will have access to that.
But anybody would be, this would be open to anybody to
Right.
come to use, not just the
Yeah,
residents.
you don't
there.
have to be a trailer park
Right.
resident.
It'd be open for anybody. If there's no other questions, Mike, we'll get with Cam and we'll try to get going on drawing that up. And
Sounds good. And then the other topic that the judge asked me to speak on, my staff and I have been developing a debris management plan. Basically, after times of a declared disaster, if we have something similar to either eastern Kentucky or western Kentucky, what do you do with 200,000 tons of trash? So I've reached out. There are two companies in Lexington that are interested in partnering with us. Neither company is interested in a bid package. They're looking more like an MOU, MOA, where if we have a disaster in Scott County, they will come to us first. And just an agreement with that. A decreased cost based on their retail pricing. I did get a price list from one, the Junk Magicians. This is a company out of Nevada that just recently expanded to Lexington. He's got 5 or 6 dump trucks, the skid steers with grapple, all the things that we would need in the first 6 to 12 hours. And then he's got reach back to other companies that would be bringing the excavators and tri-axle dump trucks and the things that will do our long-term recovery.
tell him that we're about to get it turned.
Well, I'm concentrating more on the big plan and less on the companies. I figure by
If we're having storms, and Lexington's having storms,
it's.
we'll probably go to Lexington first before they come to us.
I agree. That's why we're writing out the contracts for how it's going to work. But bottom line is, if we have a big deal, I'm calling everybody. Sure. We're in a good position right now because most other counties in Kentucky have not even started this process. So, I'm basically telling these companies I want an MOU with your company, and if we agree, then I'll share your contact information with other counties. But we've got the first rights. But you're right. If there's somebody in Scott County that has access to debris removal equipment, please come on. We're going to need all the help we can get. But the big thing right now is finding companies that have reached back for major disasters. People that have done hurricanes in Florida or Louisiana, that are familiar with the FEMA process and understand what we're going to need. Because a lot of the companies are coming back to me with price lists for, it costs $600 a dump truck for us to work with you. It doesn't help me. I need to know how much green debris did you have, how much white debris did you have, and a big tracking system that they're not ready to put in place. So I may end up developing the tracking system and then sharing with them so that they can put it into their process. But,
I feel like we're a little bit blessed in some way, though, with our county and public works at the city level. I mean, it seems like we have good equipment in both of those places. I don't know if we got enough.
yeah. But we absolutely, we're in great shape from that position. But it's kind of a two-pronged approach because by KRS, if we have a damaged house, we as a government can't go and get the trash out of that house. The people have to get their stuff to the road for road department or public works or whatever to be involved in. So we're trying to cover all of our bases and think of everything before we have to, so that it's not a surprise. We've already got people on speed dial. Bring everything you got, and then we'll share with other counties later.
Questions? My only question for Cam on this is the legality of if we didn't put out a bid, and then the bid not having any responses. If we had no responses, I think that then allows you to do negotiation of an agreement.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So that might be We,
All right.
it might have to be where we have to put out a bid and we get no responses. For that size of,
Yes.
for that size of a possibility.
Right, and the question that was asked by junk luggers out of Lexington was, could they do a bid for day-to-day operations and just be available for disaster? Because once we declare a disaster, then the bid process is basically off the table. Yeah.
Well, if that's the case,
Yeah. Basically, what they're saying is, if we have a hoarder house, or if we're going to, demolish something, could they be on the bid process for that and have a standing agreement? So, bottom line is, we're still working through all of the legalities and figuring out how we're going to make this happen. But we do have several companies that are ready to come if we did have a disaster this afternoon.
and that I do understand federal
Yeah.
or state declaration of emergency, then it's a different ballgame. I just wanted to have the conversation and wanted to have things in place. So we'll continue to communicate. Maybe
Yeah, absolutely.
maybe you and Cam can, when you meet about the easements,
Yeah.
and then talk about this, maybe do a little research.
Sometimes hours to get that declaration, right? Wait, yes.
It's a local disaster declaration. It's as fast as I can drive from my office to the judge and the
So you
mayor.
can make that call real quick and then.
Yes. As soon as the elected officials declare a state of emergency here, we're good. It's not a federal declaration or anything like that. So,
Thank you, Mike. Any other questions or anything?
Well, one thing, David
I'm sorry,
Livingston
Mike.
had corresponded with me saying that CAECO has a contract he believes with a national company, that you might want to look into that. There might already be established in case there's-
that's probably the company that I'm trying to get to from Florida, but
Okay.
I'll reach out to Magistrate Livingston and make sure that we're talking about the same company.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So the next item that I wanted to discuss was Cam is much appreciation for Cam, and he's worked with Devin Golden to draft an interlocal farmers market agreement. And I'm not going to, we're not going to sit up here and read the thing in its entirety, but wanted to talk about just a few items that are in there. Basically, it's a joint venture that maintenance would be split 50-50. We would be responsible for getting the maintenance done, but then would bill the city. Since it's on the city parking lot, the city, their insurance would cover the facility. And then one of the things is that in the interlocal, it is always reserved primarily when on Saturday mornings when our farmers market is operating, they have priority. And then it could be available for additional rentals of private parties, and tourism would handle that for us. They would develop a schedule and they would handle the application process, and then the interlocal allows for tourism to keep that rental fee just to support tourism. What that rental fee would be, how we'd structure that is yet to be determined, but we had to start somewhere, and I think this is a very good start. Comments and questions about what you've read from the email that shared the draft.
I would just say, obviously this was in the email, obviously this is a draft, so it may continue to change. Devin and I have discussed whether tourism needed to be included as a party. We kind of both think that they do. And then there's also, I guess there's been some discussions between the judge and the mayor regarding whether the city or tourism would make any capital contribution towards this. So Devin just wanted me to let you all know that's, something that has been discussed.
So that has been discussed. I can share with you from a letter with Allison Johnson with the Extension County Manager, that the Cooperative Extension Office is committing $50,000 towards the Farmers Market Pavilion project, and I'm very much appreciative of that. I went out and met with them and explained the project, and they were very excited, to say the least, and very supportive of moving forward. And try to answer any other questions about that. I'm trying to. If we can get this interlocal done, then we move forward.
Oh, that's her, sorry.
Then we move forward, and Branch Secretary Carroll's working as we speak as well.
Stacey, I heard something fall on the floor.
Now, one other draft that was shared, and I spoke with Mayor Jenkins about this, and it's something that would be presented to the City Council in the near future as well, along with this draft, is a draft RFP that Fiscal Court would put out asking for any proposals for naming rights. And we would have the ability to reject any and all proposals, but I think it's fair. You have in Lexington and in other communities, Fifth Third Bank, for example, in Lexington, it's the Fifth Third Bank Pavilion there, and it'd be interesting to see if any private entity would be interested in the naming rights and making a capital contribution to the project. And we'd see what came back, and then we would talk about the prospects, and then make a decision on if any of those proposals would be something that the court and the city council would want to support.
Would you do it for permanent naming rights, or would it be so many years?
We'd see what was offered.
In the past, what we've done with the parks, it's been for amount of time. So
Yeah.
10 years, 5 years, something like that. Then
But in the RFP, we kind of left it open-ended. I mean, if y'all want to put a time frame in there, we can. But I thought just see what was proposed.
yeah. And sometimes things happen, like United Bank was a sponsor, I believe, at Brookings Park at one time, and then they've changed banks to West Banco, and you can eliminate those United Bank signs.
This can all be obviously changed, but it does currently say priority would be given to multiple year proposals, so.
So, if y'all have any questions during the week,
You could say, I'm sorry, you could say like, hey, we want a 5-year agreement, or if you want to put a timeline, you could. Yeah.
But somebody, I would prefer to see what we got. But putting that in there about multi-year, I think, would lead them in that direction. Any questions about either one of those? And hopefully we can bring these back on Friday for your all's consideration. Anything else there? Mark Sutton is with us, and while Mark's here, I do want to mention Mark has came to me and requested consideration for the court to approach the Soil Conservation Board about a possible look at switching sites, and the rationale of switching sites with Soil Conservation Board is that the coroner's office could use the bays for a potential budget request of a body cooler, and then when Mark has the need to store a body, currently we have 0 body coolers or access to any cooler in the county, and I think Mark anticipates making a budget request to the court for consideration of purchase of a cooler, or I don't know if you can lease a cooler. I don't know, but that's a consideration. And the site on at the Soil Conservation Board of the old firehouse, those bays would work. So I reached out to
Where is the local conservation board?
It's
Penn-
Penn Street.
Penn Street.
Penn Street. I'm sorry.
It used to be a fire department for the county.
Used to be, I mean, years ago. Yeah.
Used to be the fire department.
So I have reached out to the Soil Conservation Board, spoke with Darcy, sent an email. I asked Darcy to forward that to the Soil Conservation Board commissioners and just share that this is a request for consideration from the coroner and that any of this would have to be approved by the court because there is, by the Soil Conservation Board, if it would meet the needs, if the Hamilton Street building would meet the needs of the Soil Conservation Board. There is an existing lease with the Soil Conservation Board, so that would have to be a consideration as well. I've already had in the last few months a request from the Soil Conservation Board to renew that lease to push it on out, and they're just trying to make sure they have a facility to call home, and
It's $1.
it's $1. So
So we own that Penn Avenue Fire?
yes, yes, and it has 3 bays. Mark, would you like to make comment or add anything?
I think it would be a better location for us, Judge. Thank you for bringing this up. There's several times here lately, Scott County's growing quite a bit, and we're starting to make a lot of calls in my office. And there's a lot of times where we need that cooler to store a person. A lot of people are moving in to Scott County, and their families are still in other states. And there's a lot of time that the coroner's office has to notify the next of kin and even hold that person until that family lets us know what they want to do, funeral home preference or whatever. And there's times here in the last couple of months, I've had as many as a couple of people in my office waiting for families to notify me, and we do not have a cooler. Cooler would enable that process to carry on a couple of more days or maybe even a week before you would find out. And neither one of our funeral homes, even our hospital, does not have a cooler facility as far as storing.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
do.
And
We could use the one out there behind the fire station on Cincinnati Pike, where we do with the Zelton Angel with the.
all of the
Yeah. I mean, there is a possibility if there was a mass type of situation, I think that we could utilize that. But on a day-to-day situation, I don't think that's probably practical.
Yeah, we're looking at a 4 to 6 body cooler. And the other thing is that would be like an 8-foot by 16-foot square box, basically, with a refrigerant unit on it. And there's just not room or a place to put it down here at this location. And again, with this location, we're having to bring people to our office for identification and notification of families. You know, there's a lot of times we're having to unload out into the public right down there. So with this building where we've got the 3 bays. Yeah,
It's a ghost.
so with this particular building, we can actually back into and load and unload. And when funeral homes come to pick up someone, they could actually back their vehicle in, and you wouldn't have to do it out into the public. It would just be a much better facility for us, I believe.
Questions?
And you could store some of it. I know that you got multiple vehicles, and you could store some of them in there as well.
Yes,
Whereas-
we have the
yeah.
2 vehicles, and we could also, keep those in out of the weather and stuff, so forth. When we're working.
I thought that Corner Gobel had a 3-body cooler at one time. But
We did have a 3-body portable chest type cooler.
Yeah.
It has, I'm trying to think, I think it's about 10 years old, I'm not sure. But it's not working anymore, it doesn't work. I actually have it out to JR's at the old road department. We're
Okay.
gonna surplus it.
It's just
I think it would cost more to have it fixed than
sure.
put it.
Ryan, yes, sir.
Does the soil board need, is there anything that this place would have that they would need? I'm not really sure why they.
There's a standing lease agreement that's been there for years. They require they need a place to meet. They have a staff person that is there every Monday through Friday, I think.
They don't need, like, the bay as a space as a firehouse.
John can help me. Right now, they do not use any of the bay. Is that correct?
No, they got it basically walled off, so the only thing they have is the offices. We actually still have the bay that's kind of look over here on.
And that would be a plus for us too, because then we could separate that part, with the bodies not into the area where we're gonna be working in the office area. You just kind of need to separate that.
But they don't even use that section of the building.
I just didn't know what they did with the building.
Which used to be fire department storage.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, we were storing
Right.
stuff in there.
And that bay area would need a little bit of sprucing up, I guess, for a better word, some electric work and maybe some lighting. Maybe replace the bay doors because they're not insulated. But as far as facilitating the coroner's office, I think it'd work out really good. And this office that we have currently, when you walk into it, it has a conference area, office space, and then back through the building, there is 2 other locations for offices. So you could have like 3 different offices in there.
Any other questions? We'll get feedback from the Soil Conservation Board. I think they were going to reach out to you to come by and meet, and then we'll share and go from there. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
With that said, that leads me to the next topic that we've discussed quite a bit is the Regional Detention Center proposal from Grant County. And, I have talked at length with Grant County and tried to do some research about additional opportunities or options. And I think Jeller Broyles was here. I asked Jeller Broyles if he could confirm about being here today and to be able to answer any questions or give feedback. Just to give you follow-up, today there's 109 inmates at the Scott County Detention Center. From our records, the high for January of this year was 118. The low was 102. And, as we reported when we had our work session before, Jeller Broyles, I was just saying that we're going to start the conversation about the proposal and try to follow up with any questions. And what was reported today, Jeller Broyles, was 109 inmates there at the Scott County Detention Center. And from records we have, the high count was January, for January was 118 and the low was 102.
That sounds about right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How many current inmates are currently at another facility, either Clark County or somewhere else?
Probably 6 or 7.
6 or 7.
Mm-hmm.
And then, do you know approximately, how many of the current inmates that we have are state inmates?
Again, I can get those numbers for you, but off the top of my head, I'd say probably 16.
About 16.
16, 18. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. So, we've talked about this proposal that Grant County has brought to us, and, the issue that we talked about before was, we have an 86-bed jail. We continue to grow. In my opinion, there will be a continued need for additional places to house inmates or have them secured at another facility. And we're going to continue to grow. People will continue to break the law, and it's a reality. So in my mind, having this discussion is appropriate. Back, I think it was the fall of 2019, you prepared this,
Mm-hmm.
and it was for the Capital Projects Committee. And at that time, you listed July 1, 2019, that we had 135 inmates.
Mm-hmm.
And this whole thing, this whole presentation was centered around your opinion that we needed a new jail.
Correct, yes.
What has changed since this to today, other than we had 118, and at this time we had 135. So when we get to 135, are you coming right back here and saying we need a new jail?
Well, I've told you before in an open court meeting that about 140 is about the maximum that I want to house down here. There's a certain amount of flexibility that is expected in county jails because the population, the intakes and the releases are so fluid. The SO or KSB can have a road check one night and our numbers can shoot up, for instance.
And that's just
reality.
reality.
We have no control over what we take in, and we have very little control over what we take in. And we've got very little control over what gets released unless it's me looking to try to house inmates at another facility.
So you've had that agreement with Clark County. Is that a formal written agreement, or is that just?
No, it's a verbal agreement with their jailer.
And how much do they charge us a day?
It's $50 a day.
$50 a day.
And that agreement actually stemmed out of, we had some inmates that we were having some problems with down here, and because of our limited capacity down here, we only have 6 general population inmate cells for males and 3 for females. And so once they get into, or once they have problems with inmates, or they have problems with individuals on the street, it's our goal to keep them as safe and secure as possible. We don't want them getting into altercations if we can help it. So we need to keep those individuals away from one another. And so the genesis of the agreement with Clark County was that we had some individuals that needed to be housed somewhere else for their safety and the safety of other inmates.
So,
and because they were difficult inmates to deal with, the Clark County cost, $50 a day, is a little bit higher than what we can negotiate with some other counties. I think Woodford County charges us $45 a day.
so do you currently have any inmates at Woodford County?
I think we've got 1.
So my big concern is the future and making sure that we're not, we need to plan. And that's been really the whole thought process is, we know where we're at with the reality and the count. But as we move forward, other than us building our own new jail, which we have talked about, the cost of that being, really an impact on our budget, and we'd either have to cut current programs or we'd have to raise revenue from some other way if we went to build a new jail. And the cost would be, in my mind, a minimum of $35 million, and over time bonding that, we're talking about $50 million over 20 years. And that's going to be on us for 20 years. And I think our job is to look at every opportunity that we have and then make a decision based on that. And we've laid a lot of things out. What would be your plan once we got to 140 again? What would be your plan to deal with sending inmates somewhere else?
Well, it would be similar to what we have in place now. If we reach that number today, then I would be looking for other facilities that I'm comfortable sending our inmates to, sending them for housing at those facilities.
Do you think that we ought to have a formal agreement with other facilities to address that?
I don't think so. I mean, a formal agreement would be okay. It's worked well. The verbal agreement that I've had with the other jailers that I work with has worked well. Grant County, when the current jailer got in, he sent me a proposal to house up there. And this has been 4 or 5 years ago. There was a new county attorney in at the time. There was a new jailer, Mike Webster, at the time. And he sent me a contract that they use when they house for other counties, and it was I thought it was kind of cumbersome and locked us in. I can't remember the specifics of it. And, of course, you know my feelings on Grant County anyway, so I wasn't really interested in housing at Grant County anyway.
So let me ask you this. Your feelings on Grant County, what facts do you base your feelings on Grant County about?
The 20-year history that they have between...
And you and I had a conversation that you never spoke to Mike Webster one time before this proposal was brought up. Never one, after this was brought up, you never spoke to him one time about a safety record of his administration, or if any of those individuals were still employed at that facility.
That's correct.
Would you think it's fair if you were held responsible for something happened at a previous administration?
I think it's reasonable that,
that you would be held responsible for it?
I think it's reasonable that that is taken into account, that you're not just discounting the history of that facility, the history of that staff. Just because you have a new jailer doesn't necessarily mean the staff are going to act any differently or do their job any differently.
But wouldn't you think it'd been appropriate for you to pick up the phone and say, hey, can we talk about safety at your facility?
To what end? For what purpose?
If you were going to send somebody there. They've made a proposal for us to send inmates there. You're saying you're concerned about the safety of the facility, but you never once picked up the phone to talk about the facility and the current administration. Is that true?
Yeah, I haven't reached out to them
Never
as far
once.
as their safety records
So-
since Mike Webster has
So
started in. Yeah.
after we shared the proposal, what's been shared is that their safety records, their facility reviews, all look very similar to yours. And you and I know, and everybody on this court knows, that we cannot predict the future, and anything could happen at any time. You transport inmates from our Scott County Detention Center to Clark County.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference in doing that and going to Grant County?
We're not transporting inmates in the first 24 hours, which is the most dangerous time of incarceration.
That's the difference.
That's a big difference.
Okay. All
The
right.
inmates we're transporting, we have for a period of time. We know and are familiar with their medical issues. We know they're not incarcerated, but intoxicated under anything, or they shouldn't be. They don't have the risk or near as great a risk of ODing on us on the road or detoxing on us on the road or having a medical event that we're not familiar with on the road.
That's the difference.
That's the big difference.
Okay. Now, with that said, I still want to go back. Once we get to 135, 140, you're the jailer. Who makes the decision of where we send those inmates past that? And it is my opinion that a formal agreement with another facility gives us security, and we're taking care of our community. So what would be your plan after 140?
A formal agreement, I'm certainly okay with. I'm okay continuing with a verbal agreement, but basically to operate the same as I see the need for inmates to be housed in other facilities, then I reach out to those facilities, and if they have the capability of housing for us, then they go ahead and house for us.
Are they in the same boat as us, though, so they're getting full?
Well, since you asked that, let me read from November 2022 to 23. Bourbon County, 197 beds, 277 inmates. Let's go down through here. Clark County, where we're sending them now, 156 beds, 224 inmates. Fayette County, I called Mayor Gordon. I asked Mayor Gordon, do you have any room for us if we needed a contract? Mayor Gordon said, Judge, I've got the same problem you all have and every other jail has. I have not got the staff. They're 100 short is what she told me. But their jail does have some, like a couple hundred extra beds, but she doesn't have the staff. Franklin County, 221 beds, 288 reported inmates there. As you go down, of course, Jessamine County, I talked to Judge West, 96 beds, 90 is their population, but they don't have the staff and would not be interested in a contract. And then you go down to our neighbors to the north, back to them. Grant County, as we know, Grant County has 284 beds, and reported population at this time was just 132. I'm thinking that's a little low. I think it's not counting some additional inmates. But the only option, from what I can find, for sending inmates to another facility that is not extremely overcrowded is Grant County. That's the only option.
If you want to use your criteria as to where they should be sent based solely on available beds, then that's fine. I would agree.
So what other criteria would you use?
The way the jail's being run
And
problems that they've had.
so from the records that's been shared, does the current administration at Grant County have any, what problems do you have? What concerns do you have currently with the current administration?
I don't have any concerns with the current jailer that's up there right now.
Then why, I don't know what else to say.
Well, I've already said that my concern is based in their history up there. So the last 4 years since Mike Webster has been jailer, he may have improved it. I haven't heard of the inmate abuse, lawsuits, the inmate deaths that were occurring before. Maybe they have been occurring and I haven't heard of them, but I haven't heard any since then. But it's the history that Grant County Detention Center has. That is my concern.
Yes, sir. So your plan would be to house and contract with another facility. So I've listed these facilities, and there are not, if your criteria is current, is the current status of how many are there, there's not good options. That's my concern. And I would be in favor of trying to formalize an agreement with some facility so we're not just going by the seat of our pants. Now, here's some options. One is Jailer Broyles has reported that we're fine. We don't need, additional jail, a new jail, or really right now with the numbers, we're good to 140. So we could do nothing. That's one option. Another option is move forward with a regional proposal that's been presented, try to answer questions. Number 3, contract with another jail. I can report to the court that the Grant County facility and the current jailer and the judge executive has declined any contract relationship. They will not take 40, they will not take 20, and the reason is because they feel like you have operated in bad faith, and that's a direct quote. And they do not trust that it would be a collaborative relationship that would be working together to try to safely and securely house inmates. The other option that we could look at is building a new jail. I've shared my concerns about costs. Number 5, one thing that I have brought up is proposed to create a regional jail agreement that keeps our jail open and partners with another jail that has beds available like Grant County, and that we would work together collaboratively to fill all the beds. That's really doesn't address Grant County's issue either, because they don't think it would work because of just the staffing issues. And then, we would have the cost as well here, which would be significant to still operate ours and then try to pay for expenses at another jail. That would be a challenge. I'm just trying to lay out all the options. And then the issue is, how do we, secure beds past 140. And I'm open and would entertain the pleasure of the court for any other ideas. There is one other item that we could talk about. I was at, and this has crossed my mind already. We have a stream of money coming from the opioid settlement. And I think, Michelle, we received $266,000 of that. And over 10 years, it's going to be like $1.4 million. The city's going to receive some money, but it's not very much. It's not near what we'll have. What was presented yesterday at the judges' conference that other communities are thinking about doing is partnering with a private nonprofit residential drug treatment provider to provide a residential treatment option in Scott County. We would partner with them through a diversion program, and this would be totally up to the court system, CAM, his office, Commonwealth Attorney's office, and then our circuit and district judges to evaluate low-level offenders that are in the justice system because of an addiction issue. And there could be that option where the judge would offer the individual a diversion, and they would attend this residential treatment that would be ran by a nonprofit provider, and then they would go through that treatment protocol. That I have no control of that other than trying to set it up as a tool. After they completed this residential, then they could transition to the IOP that we have set up with Isaiah House. So that could be an option. It would take, I think, in my opinion, additional funding, but there are grant funding available. So I've made an appointment to meet next week with Grayson Evans to look at grant opportunities. Grayson's with Bluegrass Ag. That's the only other option in my mind that we have. And the low-hanging fruit, we've talked about the regional. There's concerns. We've talked about a contract past 140 with another facility. And I've just shared with you, if your criteria is population currently, those things are very, it's a challenge. And then we could pursue a diversion program. By taking the diversion, it would keep inmates out of our jail, possibly. Now, jailer broils, any magistrate, does anybody want to give feedback on this?
I got a couple of questions, and this might be for the sheriff or for the jailer. It doesn't make a difference who. I know sometimes these inmates are assigned to these diversion programs, but there's, my understanding may be wrong, there's no obligation for them to stay there, right? So they can go in there and they can...
The diversion program, they wouldn't be an inmate.
Yeah, they could walk right out if they...
They could... Correct. Yes. They would not be an inmate, but it's a diversion program that's like you need to...
Yeah, I mean...
You would be violating.
Right, like obviously this is just in an early discussion phase, but I assume when you say diversion, either it would be like you'd go on probation and you'd have to complete this residential program as a condition of your probation rather than serving time in jail. My assumption, though, is if you violated it, ultimately, I guess you go back to jail. Or if you did it, you could do it as a diversion, I guess, where like, hey, you can avoid a conviction if you complete this, program and successfully or something. So you could do it either way.
But you've said before, Jailer Brules, that it's your estimate that 65% of the inmates in your facility have addiction issues that have caused them to be in the legal system.
Yeah,
is that fair?
I think that's accurate. Yeah.
David Livingston, do you have a comment?
I do too, and if I go off screen, it's because I'm on my phone and I'm looking back and forth at some different things. Jailer Broyles, there's been a lawsuit that was filed by your association, the Kentucky Jailers Association, and it's been joined things. Can you explain to the court what that lawsuit would potentially have an effect? That lawsuit would potentially have an effect on county jails if your association is successful.
Yeah, I don't know enough about the particulars of the lawsuit to really speak of it. I know it has to do with the housing of state
Have they
inmates.
not shared that with you?
If they have, then I've overlooked it. I haven't seen it yet.
Okay, because I know that I spoke with your executive director, and I know that there's been a ton of information put out on it through the association, asking for feedback and all that. So, okay, would you mind finding out what the consequences could be on the jails, whether it be positive or whether it be negative, and come back and let us know essentially why that was filed by your association and what we could expect should they win.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay. Another thing that I wanted to kind of bring to the court's attention, and again, if I go off camera, I apologize because I'm pulling up some stuff on my phone from some emails that I had. So if you all would write this down, it's KRS 441.025, and it's county responsibility for incarceration of prisoners. And it actually talks about contracting with another county, and what is required by the court and what our responsibilities are. And so it just talks about that the fiscal court shall provide for the incarceration of prisoners arrested in the county or sentenced or held by order of the courts. And then it tells by the manner of what they can do, but where we provide and maintain a facility, or we contract with another county. Now, when it talks about contracting with another county, I don't believe that's a verbal agreement, because there's no such thing as a verbal contract. And I think anything that we do as a county in this matter, when it talks about life safety of an individual that's been placed in our hands through the legal system, then we need to have a contract in place where, as much as possible, if we take that inmate to another facility, that liability is taken off of us because we lose total control of that inmate while they're at that other facility. Through a verbal agreement, we're not going to be able to have that situation. Then there is another KRS. It is, let me find it real quick. It is KRS 441.105. When it comes to other elected officials, I typically try to stay out of their business because if it pertains to them, they were elected by their constituents, even though we have some of the same constituents. I expect them to do their job and follow up and do what KRS says and everything else. Well, KRS 441.105 talks about what the jailer shall do. And in this KRS, the jailer shall submit a quarterly report to the fiscal court regarding the physical condition of the jail, the number of jail personnel needs, and other matters as requested by the fiscal court. I don't believe I've ever received this type of report. I do remember back in the day, Mr. Humphrey had provided this kind of information to us, but I don't remember the last time I've ever seen a report. Then it also talks about a monthly report in a electronic format, and I'm not sure when it says to the department, so I'm going to assume that's going to be the fiscal court because that's what this is talking about. Not unless it's talking about the department, the DOJTC or something like that. And it lines out the unit of government whose law the prisoner is charged with violating, the statute or ordinance, the status of the prisoner, whether pending trial or post-conviction, age and sex of the prisoner, and the county responsible for the incarceration of the prisoner. And I don't think I've ever seen that report either. So, General Boyce, I think what we need to do as a court, since these are some things that are required by KRS, because they say the jailer shall, I'd like to get together with Judge Covington, maybe another magistrate and yourself, and put down in paper exactly what the expectations are for reports back to the fiscal court, so that we're not surprised by anything in the future regarding our local detention center that the taxpayers put out a ton of money to support. So, Judge, if at some point in time, if you kind of set up a meeting for us to be able to talk about what we would like to see in that report, because it's my understanding after talking to General Counsel at CAGO that not only can we request those things that are in the KRS, we can also request additional information. And we can request it actually monthly if we like, as opposed to quarterly. I'd like to get that put together so that we can start receiving those updates so that we are not caught off guard again in the future regarding the number of prisoners, overpopulation, underpopulation, if you want to call it, or personnel issues that may arise in the future.
Comments?
Yeah, just like we discussed at the workshop a couple of weeks ago, if we can iron out exactly what you all would be interested in receiving a report on, be happy to get it to you monthly, quarterly, however you wish.
David, the only thing I would add, just as a minor,
David Cam's got a comment.
as a minor point of clarification, the term department does mean Department of Corrections, so for the monthly electronic report.
So it would be a quarterly.
Yeah, I don't see, everything else you said, I have no problem with, and I don't see why we couldn't request a copy of it.
Okay, so we'll schedule this and try to get everybody on one page. Now, go ahead.
I had one additional question. One of the things that we had talked about when Grant County was here was the different programs.
Yes.
And you know that I've been pushing for the work program, and I believe there was an article in the newspaper that's going to start up in March.
This article you're talking about?
Yes.
That's the plan.
Can
Yes.
you tell me what other programs that you are doing? Because as we were here, some of the deputy jailers were saying, yeah, I'm doing this and we're started this. Can you tell me exactly what other programs that you have?
So we have MRT down at the jail that we're certified to instruct on, and actually we're certified to instruct on, there's several different classes within MRT that we can teach. We just have to submit a request to DOC for approval for us to be teaching them at our facility. But the instructor that we have is certified to teach 5 or 6, some of which overlap with what Grant County has with the MRT program.
You're doing it or you're not doing it? That's kind of where I want to know.
MRT, I think we've started that back up.
Okay.
Yeah. GED we're doing.
Okay. Okay. So
and the road crew program we're planning on starting up. I did check. It was brought up at the workshop. SAT program for county inmates, which I was not aware that any county inmate would qualify for SAT. So I did some checking on that. There is a PSAT program. P stands for pretrial. So it's not a jail program, it's through pretrial services, and our pretrial services in this area does not offer it to certain qualified county inmates. However, the supervisor that I talked to, he said that he would be okay having a discussion about possibly starting it. He wasn't familiar with it. He knows that it is offered kind of sporadically around the state, and that is offered to certain county inmates that meet a certain criteria. And I'd certainly be open to that as well, but that injects basically a county inmate. You know how we've talked about a centralized list being in Frankfurt? It actually scoots for qualified inmates. It will scoot them to the front of that list to get them into a SAT bed somewhere in the state, wherever that.
But we're not currently doing it now, though.
We are currently not doing it, correct.
So GED, MRT, and
correct, and that's it right now. Yeah.
So one is looking on your website. It said these programs are suspended. Church.
Oh, church is going on as well. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm just reading from your website. It says it's suspended. So church, AA.
Yeah, AA. You know, it's been kind of hit and miss getting them in there. They're supposed to be back starting again Wednesday.
Okay, NA.
Narcotics Anonymous. I don't have a lead on somebody being.
Do they sometimes almost work
They do kind of work in
Yeah.
conjunction with each other. So my hope is once AA starts again on Wednesday, that we will be able to work through them to maybe get NA back in there.
And then you said GED is started, but on your website it says it's suspended.
Okay.
No, I mean, so I'm just trying to figure out, like,
I would submit to you that the website has not been updated.
okay, yeah, because there's a bunch of things that are suspended, and I don't know. I'm just trying to see how the jail's functioning currently,
Right.
is compared to other options.
Yeah, the website hasn't been updated since we started offering these programs again.
Any other questions? I would have one question about the article in the paper. I'm glad to hear that the work crews are going to go back. But it says now that quarantine protocols have changed. Who changed them and what changed?
So I changed them at our facility. DOC had protocols in place and started to loosen them last year. I had the option as the jailer to maintain quarantine policy, and that's what we did because it really worked well as far as us keeping COVID out. It seemed to work well as far as keeping COVID out of our facility, away from the inmates, away from the staff. And so we continued with a quarantine policy even after DOC loosened their restrictions. And that started at a 10-day, if I recall correctly, a 10-day quarantine for each arrestee that's brought in. I think we backed it down to 8 or 7 days, then down to 5 days, a few days, and now we're at a 24-hour quarantine. So ultimately, the quarantining and the policy regarding the quarantining was what I had in place at our facility.
So could you have changed that 6 months ago? Could you have changed that a year ago?
I could have.
It was your
Yes.
choice.
Yes.
Do you all do a rapid COVID test on when someone is booked into the jail?
Only if they're showing symptoms.
Only if there's some symptoms. Okay.
And actually, we do a double rapid
Okay.
test on them.
So, at this point, what would be your request and your recommendation to the court going forward with the proposal that's been made, and then to address my concern, I think the court's concern about where we would have an agreement to house inmates past 140?
So I'll start with the agreement first. As far as a formalized agreement, I think that would be fine. I think that would work out well. I'd like to have some input on where and not be left out of the discussion as far as where we set up an agreement with and who we set up an agreement with, because I think that I have an unusual perspective on the different jails in our area and how the jailers operate their facilities. So I wouldn't want to be left out of the discussion if we had that discussion for a formal agreement. Formal agreement sounds fine to me. As far as the bigger issue, the proposal overall, I am against the regional jail proposal. I don't think it's good for the county. I don't think it's good for the inmates or their families. And I certainly don't feel like it's good for the staff. So I'm against it for multiple minor reasons within those areas.
So your solution would be to enter into a formal agreement with another facility to house inmates past 140?
Well, yeah.
Would that be your recommendation?
No, that would not be my recommendation. I'd like to enter into an agreement. If you want a formalized agreement, I'd like to have a formalized agreement with several facilities because, again, the populations go up and down at these facilities, and that can impact whether a jailer is comfortable, whether he can house additional inmates for us or not. The different jails operate at different capacities, different medical, different whatever. And so one inmate, his needs may not be able to be met at one facility. So to keep our options open, having an agreement with 2, 3, or 4 facilities, I think would be best. And then I don't think a 140 threshold should be a hard threshold. We've got other circumstances that arise where we need to house inmates. And so just because we're under 140, I don't think necessarily I shouldn't be able to elect to house an inmate at another facility.
What number would that be?
Well, I think 140 is a good gauge to go by, that we don't want our population down here. We've been in the 150s and 160s down here. I don't want that to happen because I don't feel like it's safe for the inmates or safe for the staff. I think we can manage our facility up to about 140 inmates, and then beyond that, I think the best course of action is to look at having a housing agreement with other counties. Now, before that, we run into inmates on a regular basis that need to be housed somewhere else due to keep aparts or the specific nature of their charges, or if there's a syndicate charge where you've got several people charged with a similar crime and they have to be housed separately, then because of our limited housing space, we have to house them in other counties. So multiple reasons. I wouldn't want 140 to be, if we're under 140, I can utilize this agreement. If we're over 140, I can use it. Under, no. I need a little bit more flexibility than that.
So Sheriff Hampton, could I call on you? Who is responsible for transporting inmates to and from other facilities right now?
For court, it is the sheriff's office. In between, like when we send an inmate to another facility, or we have to get that inmate back to our facility on a permanent housing basis, it's us usually.
So it's your staff going to Clark County, it's not the sheriff's office?
Yeah. Now for court,
We get all the quotas.
yeah, the court ordered to appears, the sheriff's office has to go get those around the state.
So your staff would be doing the transportation between multiple facilities? Okay.
Correct.
So what questions does anyone else have for Jailer Broyles?
I got one question. When Mr. Jones knocked me down there, you print off this presentation.
Yes, sir.
It says in here that this is, I think from older or something, it says that we regularly violate the 127% NIC recommendation and the Kentucky Doc 40 square foot per inmate reg. So does that, is there a regulation that states how many inmates per square feet we're supposed to have? And what happens if we violate?
Well, there is a certain amount of square feet that we're supposed to provide per inmate. However, the Department of Corrections also understands that the flexibility that we have to have with the population that is so transient that goes up and down on a daily basis. The National Institute of Corrections, they say, about 25-30% is a good kind of flexibility, built-in flexibility. So if you're over 20-25%, that's okay. That's kind of to be expected in local facilities. Again, the difference between us and the prison system is they, in a very controlled way, control who enters their facility and who leaves their facility. We don't have that luxury down on the county jail level. And so what that basically said is that we're even, that flexibility of, say, 25% that we have, that most people say, hey, it's okay to be 20-25%. You can live with that short-term basis, even long-term, that's not positive, but short-term 20-25% overcrowding is okay. But once you get over the 25% to 30% or whatever, that's when something else needs to be looked at.
Thank you. Any other questions?
So,
I do, Judge.
Rob Jones has one, David.
Go
then
ahead.
We'll go to you.
so here's the issue I have. It's an 86-bed jail.
You're
It's
good,
on-
Rob.
Yeah. It's an 86-bed jail, but yet we're housing 105. Since I've been on the fiscal court, it's always been over 100. So these other ones that don't have a bed, they're having to take a mat and sleep on the floor. When I come down and visited, you showed us where you had at one point, you had them locked in a hallway without facilities. Is that a liability for the court, for the county? Because they don't have the proper facilities to be able to use. That's anytime we get over 86, that's a concern to me.
So I would agree with you. It is when we have to utilize other areas of our jail that are not secure areas of our jail that provide for the hygiene and provide for the sanitary needs of the inmate, then the inmate's reliant on staff to provide those breaks.
But then we have that issue with not having enough staff.
That's right, yes. Yeah.
So, there's got to be a give somewhere along the line. Either we got to have a contract, which I agree with Judge. I think we need a formal contract with another facility if that's what we're going to do. But it doesn't sound like any of the facilities around, they're already overcrowded.
I mean, the only one that does not have, Fayette County has beds, but they don't have the staff. Grant County has beds, but they don't have the staff. Their belief is if we joined in a regional that they could attract staff. That's an if. That's an if. And so we're caught in a rock in a hard place, in my opinion.
I mean, to me, I would like to look into the jail, because the building's going to be empty once we get the new justice building done. And I know you've already talked with some architects. I've talked to some of the guys that built that jail, because I remember it being built, about retrofitting it to add more space, which they said would probably cost us more than it would to actually build a jail.
I don't think it would cost us more, but it would be, what was described to me, would it be cost prohibitive, and like the number of beds that you would get out of it would be minimal compared to the price to make it corrections grade, because the buildings, it's not corrections grade. The ceilings, the floors, the toilets, all that stuff.
Well, Judge will tell you, I thought about this because I had a meeting with him already about it, because I'm like, why don't we go out in the parking lot and add to the jail, add 100 beds out there, which he says is probably not going to happen because the city owns the parking lot.
The city owns it. And
so we have to work with the city, but, I mean, we got to look at something to come up with a better plan on what we got, because what you're doing down there now is that's too many people in that jail, to me.
David.
Yeah, I wanted to come back to Ron Pratt's question, and I want to get some clarification. There's not a requirement, or not, I should say there is not, because this is the question. Is there a requirement in KRS on square footage per prisoner, or is it just a recommendation by a national association or by the Department of Corrections?
So it's my understanding, David, that it's a recommendation for new building, that you've got to provide a certain amount of square feet. That's where I've heard that before. Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that, because I didn't want Ryan or anyone else who's just getting into this to believe that there's a requirement on the state level through KRS for so many square feet per inmate. It's just a recommendation that's been put out there by a group. And, if you look at police departments or fire departments, there are national recommendations of so many per population amount. And so, although it is a recommendation, it's not a requirement.
Yeah, I think it is a requirement under the context that I should have been making that under, and that's under a new build, is where DOC requires a certain amount of square foot per inmate. So sorry if I misspoke on that.
So
no, you didn't. I just want to make sure it was clear.
Okay, thank you.
So it gets back to where the rubber needs to hit the road, and we need to make a decision about how we go forward and what is the pleasure of the court and the magistrates, and what direction do you want to give me on what you want to do. You've heard from the jailer. We've got a proposal on the table from Grant County. I've mentioned the contract route. I've mentioned the possibility that we could pursue a diversion program with a nonprofit private provider that could take people pre-adjudicated, I think is the right way.
Either way.
You could do it, that would maybe impact our jail's numbers to keep it from being, so overpopulated. So what is the pleasure of the court?
I would really like for us to investigate that more, because if we can get, 20, 30% of our 60% back on track in life, out of the jail, I'm not
No,
Their success rate.
would you agree with this? I'd much rather try to invest in treatment than incarceration.
We're not gonna put people, I mean, it's just like anything, we can't jail our way out of the drug problem.
What's the timeframe, Cam?
Ryan, turn your mic on.
What's the timeframe, Cam, between like arrest and when they would get in the program? Like, is it hours, days, weeks, months?
I mean, it could be any of those, you know, I guess if, in theory,
Situation.
yeah,
First time offense.
probably if they get arraigned, then they could be, I'm gonna say days or weeks probably, but, you know, we can have it set up to where there could be an immediate assessment, and if we target somebody, they could go in the program, and they could be in the program like immediately while their court case is still playing out. We have that happen, you know, now, we have people that like appear for arraignment, and they're in treatment somewhere, and they're on Zoom, so I don't know why we couldn't do that.
And just go off to wherever there's a treatment somewhere else.
Right.
Currently.
Yeah, so the difference here would be we'd have a facility here, but it's unclear. I mean, surely it would hopefully reduce the jail population somewhat. How much that would be, we don't really know.
So, Dwayne, you say you'd like to, for us to look further into the diversion program in a partnership, in a residential facility partnership. All right. Ryan, do you have anything you'd like to?
No, do we have an idea, I mean, like how much that would decrease our jail population?
I have no. There's no. I couldn't tell you.
Because beyond having them needing the addiction issues, which I would say related drug offenses down there, about 60% of our population, they'd have to qualify for the program, right?
Well,
Yeah.
That would be up to our judges and CAM. That we would have nothing to do with that. But what we would have to set up the parameters, and then we'd have to collaborate with the judges and CAM and the Commonwealth Attorney, and then we'd have to see how it ran. So that's the best I can answer. I can't guarantee anything. What about David Livingston? What's your pleasure?
I like I would like for the court to go down the path of looking at partnering with doing a residential treatment center. I think what Rob had said about the Justice Center being empty in the next couple of years once the new one is built, you know, could you retrofit to have a treatment center within there, especially since it's right there in the same building as the jail. I also believe that if we're going to go down this path, we need to look at doing formal contracts with where we're transferring inmates to. Because if we are as concerned about life safety and getting these folks rehabilitated and back onto the streets to become a productive citizen, we need to know, instead of just transferring to a facility for the lowest price and the closest, we need to know what kind of programs are they getting, what kind of things are they doing, that if we end up with somebody over there several months, what help can they receive there? I think the just transferring them to another facility is much deeper than the daily costs. And then also, I think we need to, as I mentioned earlier, have a discussion on the reports that need to be generated. But what I want to ask is, how will having a residential treatment center, how will that reduce, is there a guarantee that will reduce our numbers within our jail?
Well, David, I don't know if I can sit here and say there will be a guarantee, but if it's a tool that the court would use that has, professional nonprofit organization that would run the residential facility, that would be up to the judges to make the decisions, and
Yeah.
you would look at it, and would you possibly, as a county attorney and your staff, say, well, we've reviewed this, he's a low-level offender, he's got drug issues, we would recommend the diversion as an option? Is that how it would work?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of like Joe Pat. I'd rather see a person in a successfully completing a residential treatment than be in jail. But in terms of ultimately, it's unclear how much that would reduce the jail population and And I think while I think we, I'm all for it, and I think it's a great idea. Folks that go through these programs, in my experience, typically aren't real cooperative, at least initially. And when they're not cooperative, a lot of times you got to use jail as a sort of an enforcement mechanism.
Rounds of them.
So, in the end, what do you want to say,
I
Sheriff?
was just gonna say, in us transporting a lot to region,
Yeah.
a lot of different areas of the state, we've had a lot just walk away.
Right.
And there's no guarantee with it. We hope it works.
And presumably this isn't
But
going to
I
be a
would say
secure
probably,
facility.
I don't know, 2 out of 10
Yeah.
might work the first time, maybe. They might.
Right. No, I don't know if it's that low, but, I mean, they've gotten information I've gotten, nothing on the sheriff's office. They drop them off, the sheriff's department leaves, and that person leaves the facility. So, but the statistics show the more opportunities they have. First time
Right.
isn't as successful as the second time. Second time isn't as successful as the third time. And I think the magic number, unfortunately, is closer to like 6 before it might hit home with them.
And I think having a good residential treatment facility in the community is certainly a good thing for the community, and there's a big need for it.
And my understanding and my recommendation would be, if we set this up, that X number of beds would have to be reserved for the court system, and then the other beds that were available, the private nonprofit partner could use, but X beds would have to be reserved. What's your pleasure, Rob?
Well, I like the diversion program, but I've seen it work being in the field I'm in.
Yes,
In the
sir.
construction business, we see a lot of the drug addicts come and go. And, like Tony said, 5, 6, 7 times it might finally take for them to recover. I'm not in favor of the regional jail at all. I'm not in favor of that right now. I would like to see us be able to work within this county, look to the future, know what our needs are, and head toward that future.
So did I hear you as well say you were interested in a formal contract?
Yes, and I was hoping that's what we could do with Grant County, but that sounds like that's off the table now too, because
That's what
that
they-
would alleviated a lot of problems
That's what
right
they've
off the
shared
bat.
with me, and I've
While we
asked-
work through the problems we have now, but it sounds like that's off the table now.
Mr. Wallace?
Yeah, I would be the same as Dwayne and Ryan, I think David as well, looking at a diversion program as well as formalizing some type of agreement with the
Okay.
other jails.
Jailer Broyles, would you support us investigating a diversion program?
Absolutely.
All right.
Yes, sir.
And then, I think, would you be willing to look at other contracts that are used by other facilities that we could present to the court, formal contracts that could you carry
Absolutely.
that?
Yeah.
All right.
Now, you're asking, could I support that, or would you want me to
Well,
pursue?
I
getting
don't
this?
have the relationship with the other jailers about a formal, like, somebody has to have an example of a formal contract.
Well, I can tell you, Grant County had one 3 or 4 years ago, so I can start with that contract.
But what I'm
but yeah.
hearing from the court, David,
I think what you might be able to do is reach out to Shepherd's House, Isaiah House,
ARC,
reach out to those, yes, reach out to them, and, because I would venture to say with the number of facilities they have across the state, that they have some formal contracts with jails. That might be the easiest way to do it, because it's fewer,
we're talking about,
you're reaching out to cast a wide net.
what Jailer Broyles and I were talking about was a contract between the Scott County Detention Center, or Scott County Fiscal Court, and another detention center, or another fiscal court.
Yes.
Is that what you were gonna
Yeah,
say?
Just for the general housing of
Oh,
inmates.
okay, I
Yes.
my apologies, I thought we were
No.
talking residential.
No, but I'll immediately reach out to those other nonprofit providers that you just mentioned, David, and I will try to schedule meetings to have conversations about, how would a residential diversion program be set up and how it would look.
And I'll say too, just knowing that this discussion was a possibility, back in November, I had talked to Kirsty Willard with the Department of Corrections, and she had told me that Jessamine County Jailer and the Marion County Jailers have contracts with other jails. So I have an example of a contract between the Marion County and I think Washington County, if you want to look at that. It just
Yep.
has a model.
So the next thing is, can we set a timeline? You know, I'll immediately start working. Can you report back in a month about what jails you were able to contact and propose contracts with?
Absolutely.
All
So
right.
at next month's work session?
Let's just say the first Friday meeting of, I guess it'll be March.
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Or the work session of March. Let's talk work session of March.
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
So, any other questions or comments from any magistrate or Jailer Broyles? And then would anybody in our audience have any comment about this discussion or any requests for the court? JR, good morning.
Well, you know it.
Yeah. Come on forward, please.
Yeah, I'm Steve Price. I'm J.R. Williamson. You know, I've worked in the government for a while, and I find it, I don't know the word, is that we find ourselves constantly in this society that the government is above the regular laws. So I look at this gentleman right here, and I hope he or David can look it up in KRS, is that a fire marshal, are they allowed to come in your building? Did you see what he said? No. No. But anybody that wants to open up a business or anything in this society, our marshal is allowed to come into that structure, tell you how many people. I bet you this building right here is supposed to have a plaque on the wall that tells you how many people you can put in this room. Do any of you all find that kind of funny, that our loved ones could be incarcerated and be subjected to be, this man's, he's just a person in a hoop. Do you all find that odd, that we're once again above the law?
Well, JR, I think this court has put a lot of time and a lot of conversation into the concern of housing inmates safely and securely. I mean, we have talked about it at great length.
Well, you know, without telling on myself, I might have visited a few of these facilities. And I had the opportunity to ask the judge who was judging me about the plaque on the wall, of how many people could be in his arena. But he told me that the jailers are not allowed, or the fire marshals, who is an agency of our society, is not allowed in these facilities. And I think as a society, we might want to look at that. And with that being said, you're going to start your work program back up, right?
Yes, sir.
Well, I've been around, you know, I used to work for the county, and was around the state a lot. Some counties, have y'all ever heard back in the day we had the graveyard grannies?
Never heard of that, JR.
Well, there was a few older ladies in our community that would go around and find some of the abandoned old cemeteries in our community and would go and clean them up. Some communities use the jailer and some of their workers and go out and weed eat and clean up some of our past citizens. Because if I'm not mistaken, doesn't this court pay some money to take care of the rich people in the cemetery up here in Georgetown?
This court is in an interlocal agreement with the city of Georgetown, and the city manages that interlocal agreement for the operation of the Georgetown Cemetery.
Which the Georgetown Cemetery several years ago got financially in a bind, and the governing bodies and the taxpayers take care of that cemetery. Is that a true fact?
It predates me, but I just know that the agreement exists.
Well, so would it be fair as we own a family cemetery. We all donate money every year to take care of it. But I know there's several in northern Scott County that may not be maintained as properly because of no funding. See, I'm from a large family, so we donate and take care of it. Would you be willing to possibly research some of these old cemeteries, and if they're not getting any needs, you could take them, maybe weed eat and clean them up, just in the gesture that those people that have passed on donated their dollars to maintain this community at one time. They're no longer here, but I think just out of respect that we could take care of some of these old abandoned cemeteries.
If they're identified, that's the
Hey,
jailers. That is totally the jailer's purview. And in the past, the way it worked, if there was requests called in, we'd share those requests. Jailer would put them on the list. So
I just think it would be a great gesture as a community.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Hey, Judge?
Yes, David.
Judge, real quick, on that, regarding family cemeteries, and if they are privately owned, you might the jailer might want to check first if he can even, use, or, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say use, that's insensitive. If he would be able to allow to take inmates out there who are on the county dime, public dollars, to clean up the private property.
So if
I
it,
don't know if that would be
yeah, private property,
allowable.
would be a no. If it's a nonprofit, that owns the private property, then it would be, a probable yes. If it's a government-run type entity, it's a yes.
So,
Yeah, I think David raises a valid concern, and you would have to be able to demonstrate it was, they're being used for a public purpose. So I guess we'd just deal with it on a case-by-case situation.
Man,
yes, sir.
a consent and release form. I used them many times. Took government people on, government equipment. So there is a way. It's called a consent and release form.
I don't think there's an issue
Well,
with the
what
property.
does that form say?
It gives the county the right to go on that property and do whatever is needed. And as long as you agree, the people that own or have control of that property, they can sign off on it.
Yeah, I understand that. I think Mr. Livingston's concern is we're not allowed, the county's not allowed to use government money to enhance a private property. It has to be for public use. So,
Is that a fact?
Yeah.
If I could bring up some of my old records from when I was a solid waste coordinator, I know that we went in and cleaned up a lot of properties with tax dollars. I tried to get a lien put on the property to recoup the money, and no, it was just done, and thank you, and have a nice day.
But could that possibly have been a circumstance where it was greater public good to clean up a dump?
Code enforcement.
Was it cleaning up dumps and as solid waste coordinator?
Yeah, but you don't think cleaning up cemeteries is not for the
Yeah,
community
I didn't.
good?
I'm not saying
JR,
it's not.
I didn't say that.
It very
All I
well-
said was what was brought up was the going on private property. That was the question, and we'll investigate it and then go from there. Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. With that said, though, so I will go forward. Jailer Roars is going to try to reach out and try to identify some formal contracts and try to reach out to counties to get commitments to house X amount of inmates. And it's going to report back in a month. I am going to reach out to Bluegrass Ad. I'm going to reach out to those nonprofit treatment centers and treatment providers to see if I can get feedback. I'll report back as well. You know, the hope is, you know, that we can report back and have agreements in place that will address needs, but also possibly have a path to looking at what it would look like to provide a residential treatment facility diversion program. With that said, I appreciate you all, and thanks so much.
Can I